Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. The Taliban claim to have seized the key Chaman-Spin Boldak border crossing with Pakistan. Spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid says they have taken over the border town of Vash in Kandahar province. But the Interior Ministry said the government forces have repelled fighters from the critical transit point. Meanwhile, former US President George W. Bush called the pullout a mistake, saying civilians are left to be slaughtered. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization has called for an end to violence in Afghanistan. Meeting in Dushanbe, the SCO foreign ministers urged the Afghan government to strengthen its position for the sake of stability. In his remarks, Pakistan's foreign minister said Islamabad has played its part in facilitating an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. Iran's outgoing President Hassan Rouhani says Tehran can enrich uranium up to 90% if needed. In a cabinet meeting, Rouhani criticized Iran's top decision makers for not allowing his government to reinstate the 2015 nuclear deal during its term in office. However, he hoped that his successor would clinch a deal to lift US sanctions. Brazil has reported more than 1,600 daily deaths from COVID-19 and over 45,000 cases. In Australia, the lockdown in Sydney has been extended by at least 14 days. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 24 more deaths and nearly 2,000 new cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4 million lives and infected over 187 million people. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. The Taliban claim to have seized the key Chaman-Spin Boldak border crossing with Pakistan. Spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid says they have taken over the border town of Vash in Kandahar province. The Afghan Interior Ministry, on the other hand, said the government forces have repelled fighters from the critical transit point. Meanwhile, former US President George W. Bush called the pullout a mistake, saying civilians are left to be slaughtered. In another development, Britain said it will work with the Taliban if they come to power in Afghanistan. In an interview, Defence Minister Ben Wallace said the UK will, however, review any relationship if the group violates human rights. Earlier, China urged the Taliban to make a clean break with all terrorist forces and return to mainstream Afghan politics. And for more on this, we are joined by Brigadier retired Imran Malik, a defense analyst, joining us from Lahore. Mr. Malik, thank you very much for your time at Indus News. Firstly, after this recent statement from London, do you believe the West is slowly making peace with the possibility of a Taliban-led future government in Afghanistan?
Thank you very much for having me on your program. I think, yes, as we've probably discussed earlier as well, the writing is on the wall now. Whether we have a peace process bringing in an Afghan national government, or whether the Taliban make a run for Kabul and take over the city and the country, I think it is a fact now that the Taliban will either form the government by themselves, and even if it is a coalition government, they will have the most dominant part or the most major part of that government. So the world is slowly, gradually coming to the realization that they will have to deal with the Taliban one way or the other once they take over Kabul. And I think the Britishers are perhaps the first ones to have acknowledged this, and even President Joe Biden in his press conference had indicated that he would not be too averse, let's say, to dealing with the Taliban.
Brigadier Malik, over the past 2 weeks, the Taliban appeared to be keener to capture border towns, especially the ones that serve as trade and transit conduits. So what could be the objective behind this strategy?
I think that's a great observation, because there is a clear-cut strategic pattern in the way the Taliban are increasing or expanding their control over the country. We see that they've taken over the major trade and border crossings in the north with Tajikistan, in the west with Turkmenistan, in the southwest with Iran, and now they've come and they've taken over Spin Boldak. I mean, although news reports say that the fighting is still continuing there, but they seem to have attained a control and operating control over the road leading from Chaman to Spin Boldak and on to Kandahar. Simultaneously, they are also attacking and establishing control over the central districts. And clearly, Kabul is also coming under pressure. So there might be a sense of isolation that might be dawning on to the people in Kabul, that all the major crossings with the immediate neighbors have been taken over by the Taliban, and the central districts too are under great pressure. So I think the Taliban are moving in with a proper military strategy sort of a thing, and and their juggernaut seems to be unstoppable at the moment.
Brigadier Malik, is there a possibility of a transitional government being agreed? And more importantly, would that be the right thing to do?
I think perhaps that is the best option for Afghanistan as a whole, as a country and as a nation. Because a transitional government through a peace process probably would meet the requirements of not only the one government but the neighboring countries as well as the international community. However, as I said earlier, it will be quite difficult for the Taliban to just compromise with people they've been fighting for the last 20 years. And as I said earlier, whatever way the next government is formed, the Taliban will have to be the most dominant part of it. Otherwise, their entire efforts will be toothless, and they'll all go in vain. So I personally think that the Taliban, whatever talks or parleys they have wherever, Doha or anywhere else, they will probably dictate their terms. They will take over the country. They will form the government, and they will also get people from other representatives from other ethnicities and other sectarian groups and other linguistic groups as well, other regions as well, to form a coalition government. At least the face they put up in front of the international community will be one of a whole of a nation government, a government representing the entire Afghanistan and all its people. So I think whatever talks that take place will eventually bring the Taliban into power, and if they fail, they'll probably make a rush or a run for Kabul.
Brigadier Retired Imran Malik, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. We really appreciate that. Now moving on, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has called for an end to violence in Afghanistan. Meeting in Dushanbe, the SCO foreign ministers urged the Afghan government to strengthen its position for the sake of stability. In a statement, the regional foreign ministers called for a purely peaceful settlement. In his remarks, Pakistan's foreign minister said Islamabad has played its part in facilitating an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. Qureshi said Afghanistan's stability has a clear bearing on regional security in the SCO space. He called upon all the Afghan parties to engage constructively and work for a negotiated political solution. Iran's outgoing president Hassan Rouhani says Tehran can enrich uranium up to 90% if needed. He was addressing a cabinet meeting in Tehran. Rouhani criticized Iran's top decision makers for not allowing his government to reinstate the 2015 nuclear deal during its term in office. However, he hoped that his successor would clinch a deal to lift U.S. sanctions. Rouhani is set to hand power in early August to former Judiciary Chief Ibrahim Raisi, who won the last month's presidential elections. Iran has held talks since April in Vienna with major powers on reviving its nuclear agreement. Iran has rejected a U.S. claim of Tehran's involvement in plotting to kidnap a New York journalist. In a statement, a foreign ministry spokesman said that the U.S. accusations are ridiculous and baseless. Earlier, U.S. prosecutors charged 4 Iranians with plotting to kidnap the journalist, critical of Tehran. Prosecutors accused Iranians of hiding private investigators under false pretense to surveil the journalist in Brooklyn. Indian forces murdered 3 more civilians in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youths were targeted during an operation in the Pulwama district. The forces have also suspended internet services in the area. The troops have carried out hundreds of extrajudicial murders during the so-called cordon and search operations. Rights groups say Indian occupying forces have murdered at least 400 Kashmiris since August 2019. In South Africa, the death toll in unrest following the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma has risen to 72. Police clashed with the charged crowds who ransacked or set ablaze shopping malls across the nation. Authorities say among the victims were 10 who died in a stampede in the township of Soweto. The police said they have arrested over 1,200 people in the last few days. In a statement, the police said they have also identified 12 suspects of provoking riots. Soldiers have been deployed onto the streets in Zuma's home province, KwaZulu-Natal, and in Gauteng. The African Union has condemned the deadly violence and called for urgent restoration of order. Lebanon's Prime Minister-designate Saad al-Hariri presents a cabinet proposal to President Michel Aoun. If accepted, the proposal can end almost 9 months of political deadlock amid an economic collapse. Speaking to reporters, Hariri said the proposed cabinet can rescue the country and stop the collapse. Earlier, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi expressed full support for Hariri in his effort to form a cabinet. The presidency issued a statement reaffirming Egypt's support during Hariri's visit to Cairo. Cairo's support comes amid reports that Hariri would stand down this week if he fails to form a new government. Another rocket attack has targeted the U.S. military base in Syria's Deir ez-Zor province. Syrian state media says this is the second such incident at the Al Umar oil field in 24 hours. However, it gave no reports on the casualties or damage. The U.S. forces fighting in Syria and Iraq have not commented on the incident so far. Last week, the same field was targeted with drones. The UN has called for the accountability of those behind enforced disappearances in Syria in the past decade. The Human Rights Council adopted a resolution with 26 in favor, 6 against, and 15 abstentions. The resolution was presented by several European countries, the US, Turkey, and Qatar. It decried that Syria's crisis has entered a second decade marked by gross violations. The text condemned what it called consistent human rights violations and abuses by the Syrian regime. It also criticized other parties to the conflict but said the Syrian government is the main perpetrator. The war in Syria has killed nearly 500,000 people since it started in 2011, with all sides accused of war crimes. Palestine has hailed Ireland's Foreign Affairs Committee report on displacement and demolitions in the occupied territory. Palestinian ambassador to Ireland said Irish lawmakers have once again set the bar for upholding international law. Dr. Jilan Wahba Abdul Majid said the report shows that Dublin has a strong commitment to Palestinians' rights. The Irish committee expressed concern at the reported 108% increase in demolitions of donor-funded structures. It says those buildings include schools and medical centers, many of which are funded by the EU and its member states. The committee recommended Israeli authorities to take concrete steps to dismantle illegal settlements. Ireland demanded reparation from Tel Aviv for the destruction of projects where Irish and EU funding was utilized. The UAE has opened an embassy in Israel, becoming the first Gulf state to do so after the normalization of relations last year. At the flag-raising ceremony, the UAE's envoy hailed potential opportunities between Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Israel's President Isaac Herzog said the event is an important milestone for regional prosperity. The embassy is situated in Tel Aviv Stock Exchange building. Its opening followed the inauguration of Tel Aviv's embassy in Abu Dhabi last month. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Brazil has reported more than 1,600 daily deaths from COVID-19 and over 45,000 cases. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4 million lives and infected over 187 million people. More in this report.
The European continent that emerged relatively victorious against COVID-19 at the start of this year has now been clutched by the Delta variant. In Portugal, authorities say all cases in Lisbon and Algarve regions are of the Delta variant. Spain's caseload has surpassed 4 million as the strain drives a surge of infections among the unvaccinated young people. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has warned that more people need to be vaccinated in the country before restrictions could be lifted. Meanwhile, French health workers are furious about President Emmanuel Macron's orders to get vaccinated or go home.
I don't understand why they want to force us to get vaccinated, knowing that we have rights in France. We are in a supposedly free country, liberty, equality, fraternity. So if that changes, I think they should also change the motto. You can say this is becoming a dictatorship because we are forced to do things that we do not want to do.
Italy has approved the temporary distribution of an antibody treatment by Britain's GlaxoSmithKline and U.S. company Vir Biotechnology. While in Greece, authorities said customers at indoor restaurants must furnish proof of vaccination. In Australia, Sydney's lockdown has been extended by at least 14 days after 3 weeks of initial curbs could not contain the outbreak.
And it always hurts to say this, but we need to extend the lockdown at least a further 2 weeks, from Friday the 16th of July to Friday the 30th of July. That includes home learning. However, we'll obviously assess the situation at the end of those 2 weeks and provide information beyond that. We are prioritising vaccinating aged care workers and teachers in those key local government areas.
South Korea has reported yet another record daily rise in COVID-19 cases with more than 1,600 testing positive. Bangladesh is set to lift its nationwide lockdown for religious festival Eid al-Adha even as new infections rise.
Pakistan has reported 24 more deaths due to coronavirus and nearly 2,000 new cases. The health ministry says the toll has risen to 22,642. It said the country's positivity rate has once again surged to 4.17%. The ministry says out of nearly 41,000 active cases, more than 2,200 are critical. Pakistan has logged over 978,000 cases so far, while more than 915,000 people have recovered nationwide. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan will be paying an official 2-day visit to the Republic of Uzbekistan from July the 15th. The Foreign Ministry says he has been invited by Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. The Prime Minister will be accompanied by a high-level delegation, including the Foreign Minister. The office says international issues and bilateral relations, especially trade, will be on the agenda. A number of agreements are expected to be signed aimed at deepening bilateral cooperation in diverse areas. The Prime Minister will address the first Pakistan-Uzbekistan Business Forum as well. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa says Islamabad values its relations with Tajikistan. He said this in a meeting with Tajik Defense Minister Colonel General Sher Ali Mirza, who called on him in Rawalpindi. The two discussed the overall regional security situation with special focus on developments on Tajik-Afghan border. They also exchanged views on measures to bolster bilateral defense collaboration. The visiting dignitary hailed Pakistan's role for regional stability, especially the Afghan peace process. Earlier, Mirza called on Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee General Nadeem Raza and discussed topics of mutual interest. Pakistan's Chief of Naval Staff says the country's Navy is perfectly capable of responding to any kind of aggression. Admiral Amjad Niazi made these remarks while addressing the Command and Staff Conference in Naval Headquarters, Islamabad. He also stressed on the need for complete implementation of government's policies regarding the latest wave of coronavirus. A spokesperson said the naval chief was briefed on the ongoing and future projects of Pakistan Navy. He added that the conference was held to review the regional security situation and operational preparedness of naval forces. In Cuba, a man has died in Havana during unprecedented anti-government protests that have shaken the island. The Interior Ministry said 36-year-old man was part of a group that attacked a government facility. Global watchdog NetBlocks says Cuba has restricted access to social media and messaging platforms. At a news conference, Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez termed the U.S. blockade on Cuba cruel and deliberate. Meanwhile, in the U.S. state of Florida, protesters blocked a major highway to express support for Cuban demonstrators. The Miami area has long been home to the largest Cuban exile community and a focal point for the anti-Castro sentiment. The European Union has proposed an effective ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars as of 2035. This comes as the part of a broad climate package which will accelerate a switch to zero-emission electric vehicles. In a statement, the EU Commission proposed a 55% cut in carbon emissions from cars by 2030. In order to boost electric vehicles sales, Brussels also proposed legislation that will require countries to install public charging points along major roads. This is expected to create 3.5 million public charging stations for cars and vans by 2030. Many car makers have announced investments in electrification amid tougher emissions targets by the EU. In the U.S. state of Oregon, a raging wildfire has grown to become the country's largest active fire. Officials say the blaze has burned more than 201,000 acres across the state. The blaze, dubbed Bootleg Fire, has also destroyed 54 structures and 21 homes so far. However, the cause of the fire, which started on the 6th of July, currently remains unknown. Fire officials say the blaze will continue to spread amid high temperatures and dry conditions. Crews have made little progress containing the blaze. Meanwhile, the state is also battling 3 other fires burning through some 18,000 acres. The Russian army has sent planes to battle huge wildfires that have blanketed Siberian towns in thick smoke. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said President Vladimir Putin ordered the ministry to assist local authorities. He said the fire risk has flared up across the entire country because of the abnormal heat wave. Meanwhile, the residents complain of being suffocated by the smoke as the region swelters under a heat wave. The flames have torn across some 800,000 hectares of Russian forest. The fires have also raised fears about permafrost and peatlands thawing, releasing carbon long stored in the frozen tundra. In France, thousands of security personnel march at Paris's Champs-Élysées Avenue as the country celebrates its National Day. 5,000 participants took part in this year's Bastille Day parade, which returns after a one-year hiatus due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The National Day is observed in remembrance of the fall of Bastille in 1789. French President Emmanuel Macron presided over the ceremony, which saw warplanes roaring overhead. The celebrations also honor troops part of the EU's military mission to Mali. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says social media firms will be fined 10% of their global revenues if they do not get hit off their platforms. Addressing Parliament, he also said the government will change existing football banning orders. The move will ensure that people found guilty of racist abuse against footballers are banned from soccer games. On Sunday, 3 black players were racially abused on Twitter and Instagram following England's defeat during the Euro 2020 final against Italy. Over 1 million people signed an online petition calling for tougher rules to ban abusers from attending the games. In the Emmy Awards, TV series The Crown and The Mandalorian are leading the nominations. HBO and HBO Max led all networks with 130 nominations, followed by Netflix with 129. The British royal series The Crown and Disney Plus Star Wars spin-off drama The Mandalorian both got 24 nominations. Apple TV Plus comedy Ted Lasso scored 20 nods. Best drama series contenders also include Bridgerton and Pose. The Emmy Awards will be handed out at a ceremony in Los Angeles on the 19th of September. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Britain's Royal Shakespeare Company has opened an outdoor theatre with a new version of the Comedy of Errors. This is its first such full-scale production in front of a live audience in over a year. More in this report.
Based in playwright William Shakespeare's birthplace of Stratford-upon-Avon, the RSC built the Lydia and Manfred Grovey Garden Theatre outside its Swan Theatre by the River Avon. The Comedy of Errors had been due to begin performances in April 2020, but the RSC had to close its doors to live audiences due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The production has been now adapted by director Philip Breen for a new temporary open-air venue.
Go back again and be new beaten home! For God's sake, send some other messenger! Back!
You know, it's a beautiful spot here in Stratford. We're right by the river right here now, and so we get some heckling from some swans occasionally, all that kind of stuff. But I guess this is what happened 400 years ago. You know, there weren't too many roofs around and stuff like that in the theatre then. Now, one of my favourite things about doing this kind of stuff is that it feels sort of timeless, really.
The RSC's Garden Theatre can seat 500 people or 310 with social distancing.
I felt there are two really powerful reasons to build this theatre, one of which was as a sort of symbol, a symbol of regeneration and of opening up, but also as a transition, so that people will feel very comfortable sitting outside in the open air.
In London's West End, major productions including hit musicals such as Jersey Boys and The Lion King have been waiting for July 19th to be able to fully reopen, as operating at 50% capacity is not financially viable.
Another business update. So Wall Street stocks have surged after remarks from the Federal Reserve raised hopes of an accommodative monetary policy. Investors also assessed second quarter earnings from big banks and other major companies. Growth-linked stocks including Apple, Microsoft and Amazon led the gains in S&P 500. The Nasdaq Composite Index traded over 0.5% higher, while the Dow Jones was also up marginally. Meanwhile, oil prices dropped after Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates reached a compromise over a global supply deal. And for weather updates now, we have Munib Hamid with us.
Thank you. I am Munib Hamid with the weather updates. We're going to start with Abu Dhabi, where it is expected to get hot, with temperatures rising to 43 degrees. While in Amsterdam, the weather is a pleasant 22 with some rain. If we head to Ankara, the weather is mostly sunny with temperatures at 33. Moving down under to Auckland, the sun is out, but the temperature is chilly at 13. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, the rain will get in the way of your plans because the temperature there will be around 33 degrees Celsius. While in Beijing, there are clouds in the forecast with temperatures at 33 degrees Celsius. While Beirut will experience mostly sunny weather with temperatures at 30 degrees Celsius. Berliners will experience a bit of rain with temperatures at 25 degrees. Heading to Cairo, the hot sun will be excruciating with 37 degrees Celsius. Down under in Canberra, the winter rain is keeping things chilly at 11. In Islamabad, the rain is really pouring down with temperatures rising to 31. While in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 31 degrees Celsius with some partial sun. That's all for now.
Thank you, Munib, for the weather updates. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus Top News.